In this story, a woman walks away from her own mating altar and kisses a stranger to survive the night. But what she doesn't know is that the stranger already has her mother's name written in his notes. And by morning, she will have to decide if the man she's beginning to trust is her salvation or the most patient trap ever laid for her. There is a specific kind of destruction that only happens when the lie has been perfectly constructed. Not a sloppy lie. Not the kind born from cruelty or selfishness. The worst kind, the kind built slowly, brick by brick, from good intentions and bad courage, from a man telling himself every single morning for 2 years that times, almost love times, was close enough to the real thing. That no one would ever need to know the difference. That he could do this. That he could stand at that altar and speak the vow and mean it enough. He couldn't. And Zara found out at midnight, in front of everyone she had ever known. Here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. Zara did not break. She did not cry. She did not crumble at the altar with 60 torches burning around her and 300 wolves watching her discover that the man she had chosen had spent 2 years choosing someone else in the quiet of his own chest. She got angry. And what Zara did with that anger in the 40 seconds after the truth arrived is the reason we are here tonight. Because she looked across that torchlit courtyard and she found the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. And she did it. In front of her entire pack. In front of the altar fire. In front of the elders and the law and the man who had just broken her heart. She kissed a stranger. And the stranger was not what he appeared to be. Not even close. Stay with me, because this story starts at a broken altar, passes through a king's mountain fortress, and ends at the edge of a truth so enormous it will reach back and rewrite everything, every moment, every choice. Every word she believed was honest, right down to the very first night they met. Welcome. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Ashbourne pack held their mating ceremonies under open sky. On the night of the autumn moon, that meant 60 torches burning in iron brackets along the courtyard walls. It meant cold air carrying pine smoke and the sweet dark bite of wolf's bane oil. It meant 300 wolves pressed together in the great stone courtyard of the pack hall, dressed in ceremony colors, breathing the same charged air, sharing the particular electricity that moves through a crowd when it gathers for something sacred. Zara stood in the dressing chamber off the east corridor and listened to them through the walls. She was 26 years old. She had dark hair and sharp cheekbones that she had inherited from her mother, and a quality to her face not pretty exactly, more than pretty that fell somewhere between striking and dangerous depending on whether she was still or in motion. She did not soften herself for occasions. She never had. Even tonight. Even in her mother's ceremonial dress with amber pins holding her hair up. She stood in front of the mirror with her spine straight and her chin level, and the expression of a woman who has decided how this evening goes. Behind her, her younger sister Wren was doing the final pin. Wren was 19, and she was the kind of beautiful that doesn't know it is beautiful, which is the most devastating kind. Pale gold hair, wide gray eyes. A gentleness to her that Zara had always privately considered her greatest quality, and her most dangerous one in equal measure. Because the world does not always handle gentleness with care. Hold still, Wren murmured. I am still. Your shoulders aren't still. Your shoulders are doing the thing they do before an enforcement assessment. My shoulders don't do a thing. Wren's hands paused on the pin. Just for a second. Then she continued, and when she spoke again, her voice was careful in the way of someone navigating around something in the dark. You look extraordinary, she said. Colt is going to lose his mind. The words landed. Clean. True. Zara looked at her sister's face in the mirror. At those gray eyes that were warm and certain and holding something, she noticed it and filed it away. The way she filed everything. Because tonight was not the night for examining what Wren's eyes were carrying. Tonight she was walking to the altar. Tonight she was choosing the life she had spent 2 years building. "Let's go," she said. She walked out into the torchlight, and the crowd was everything it should have been. Warm faces on both sides of the torchlit path. Genuine goodwill. Zara had earned her place in this pack, with 8 years of work that left no room for dispute, and they knew it, and they were happy for her. She walked with her wolf quiet and settled in her chest, and the heat from the torches touched her face like a blessing, and at the end of the path Colt was waiting. Colt Ashby was exactly as he always was. That was the thing she had loved first. The absolute consistency of him, warm brown eyes, an easy smile, broad shoulders, the comfortable stance of a man who had never once questioned whether he deserved to take up space. His smile when he saw her coming was real. She could feel it from 30 feet away. She reached him. He took her hands. His grip was warm. She felt her wolf settle even further. She thought, "This is solid. This is real. This is mine." Elder Marin began to speak the ceremony words. 79 years old, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet, performing these words for the 43rd time, with the unhurried reverence of a woman who has decided that sacred things deserve to be treated as sacred, and the crowd's hunger for the feast can wait. The torches burned, and then Elder Marin reached the vow of true sight. Now, if you have never stood at a wolf altar and heard those words, I need you to understand what they are. The true sight is not ceremony. It is not symbol or tradition dressed in dramatic language. It is the oldest law in wolf nature, something that existed before packs, before hierarchy, before any of it. When two wolves look into each other's eyes at the altar fire and speak the vow, the wall between soul and soul simply ceases to exist. For 30 heartbeats, you see everything the other person carries. Their loves, their losses, the truths they have never said aloud, their wolf's deepest knowing, stripped of every layer of management and performance and careful human construction. It cannot be faked. It cannot be prepared for. It simply shows you what is true. Zara looked into Colt's eyes. She saw the warmth first. It was the first layer, and I want to be clear, it was genuine. The affection he carried for her was real. The 2 years were real. Every morning run along the ridge, and every argument about pack politics, and every night they had sat across from each other at her kitchen table real. But the vow went deeper, past affection, past choice, past the version of himself he had constructed and inhabited for 2 years with genuine effort and genuine care. And in the very center of him, in the place that exists beneath memory, beneath reason, beneath the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we want, Zara found the name that owned him. It was not hers. It was Wren, her sister, her 19-year-old, pale gold, gray-eyed, gentle-hearted sister, who was standing 20 feet behind her in the 3rd row, with her hands clasped in her lap and her eyes fixed on the ground. Had been fixed on the ground since the ceremony began. Zara now understood with the expression of a person who has been not looking at something for so long that not looking has become its own form of devotion. The 30 heartbeats stretched into something that had no name. Colt's wolf had chosen Wren before Zara existed in the equation. The recognition was old and rooted and enormous. It was not a feeling he had developed. It was a fact he had been born with and had spent years trying to outrun. And Wren had turned away from it, deliberately, with both hands, because Zara had not yet found what she was looking for. And Colt had turned toward Zara because Wren had redirected him and he was lonely and Zara was close and real, and he had wanted so badly to let that be enough. He saw her seeing it. In the true sight, nothing is hidden from either side. His face in that moment. I will not describe it in detail because some things deserve to be carried quietly. What I will say is this. It was not the face of a villain. It was not the face of a man who had set out to use her. It was the face of someone who had tried genuinely, painfully, daily, and had stood at this altar still failing, still unable to make the truest part of himself comply with the life he had chosen. The sorrow in it was real. That almost made it worse. Elder Marin's voice continued above them, carrying the ceremony forward on its ancient architecture, heading toward the moment of binding. The torches burned. 300 wolves waited. And Zara looked at the fire, looked at the crowd, looked at the path between the torch-lit rows that led back to the gate and the village and the small house on the western edge where she had grown up and where she would return tonight alone if she walked away from this stone. She looked at the gate, at the shadow beyond the last torch where the courtyard wall met the dark, and there, in the exact gap between the final bracket of light and the closed iron gate, stood a man. He was standing at the periphery of everything, in the deep shadow at the courtyard's edge, with a traveler's pack on the ground by his boots and his arms loosely crossed and his face turned toward the ceremony. Not pack, not invited. The rough, dark clothing of a lone wolf between territories. Road-worn, weather-beaten. He was watching everything with the specific, unmoving attention of someone who is present without belonging, which is a very different quality from simply watching. His hood was down. In the torchlight, his face was half amber and half shadow, and he was nobody. He was absolutely nobody. He was the most dangerous thing Zara could think of. She let go of Colt's hands. She walked off the altar, not away from it toward the gate, toward the shadow, toward the nobody at the edge of the light. And the crowd, 300 wolves, parted for her the way a crowd parts when something moves through it with complete certainty about its own direction, not because they understood, because something in the animal part of them recognized that this was not confusion or distress or impulse. This was a decision. She heard Colt say her name. She heard Elder Marin draw breath sharp, specific, the breath of a woman suddenly paying a different kind of attention. She walked to the stranger at the gate. He saw her coming, had seen her coming from the first step. He did not flinch or retreat or prepare a smile. He simply went very still, the stillness of something that has assessed what is approaching and decided to let it arrive. Up close, he was taller than the shadow had suggested, a jaw with enough angle to be worth noticing. And his eyes, amber, caught in the torch reflection, were looking at her with an expression she had no framework for and approximately 3 seconds to process. She took his face in both hands. She kissed him. Let me tell you what that kiss was and what it was not. It was not passion. It was not recklessness. It was not the act of a woman losing her mind at the altar. It was a door slamming on a burning house. It was Zara choosing deliberately, completely, with her eyes open and her wolf bearing witness, to destroy the version of her life that had just been revealed as hollow, and to do it in a way that left no room for anyone to look at her and see a woman who had simply crumbled. She was not crumbling. She was detonating. On her own terms, with her own hands. She kissed a stranger in front of her entire pack at the flame of her own altar. And the stranger, the man she had chosen at random from the shadow at the gate, kissed her back. Not tentatively. Not in the cautious way of a man trying to gauge what is expected of him. He kissed her back with the certain, unhurried attention of someone who has assessed a situation fully and decided to meet it where it is. When she pulled back, the courtyard had gone so quiet, she could hear the torches breathing. The stranger's amber eyes were looking at her with an expression she would spend weeks afterward trying to name. And Elder Marin's voice, when it cut through the silence, was the voice of a woman who has just pulled a very old, very heavy book off the shelf of her memory and found the page she was afraid of. "Sealfire kiss," Marin said. 2 words. Old as the mountain under their feet. The crowd shattered into noise. Chapter 2. The silence lasted 5 seconds. Then the courtyard erupted in a sound that was not one feeling but 6 feelings happening simultaneously at full volume, which is always louder and more chaotic than simple anger or simple joy could ever be. Colt's mother made a sound somewhere to the left that suggested a woman discovering the precise limit of her composure. The crowd pressed inward. Someone near the back knocked over a torch bracket, and the clatter of iron on stone cut through everything like a blade. Colt came down from the altar. He moved toward her with the controlled, white-knuckled energy of a man who is managing something enormous and has not yet decided what form the management will take. His face was ash gray. His wolf was pressing against the surface of him. She could see it. That involuntary animal agitation. The guilt made physical. Zara. His voice. The voice she knew. She was going to have to hear that voice for the rest of her life in a different way now. And she knew it, and she carried that knowledge quietly. "Whatever this is," he said, "come back to the altar. We can— I know what I saw, Colt." Her voice was steady. She was surprised by that. She had thought it would shake. "In the true sight, I know what I saw. And I won't speak it in front of this crowd because it would hurt someone who doesn't deserve a public wound. But I know." The ash gray deepened. The guilt moved to the front of his face and stayed there. "Zara, don't use my name like it's a key," she said. "It doesn't open anything for you anymore." She turned back to the stranger. He was watching the exchange with the patient attention of a man who has decided to allow a situation to fully develop before he inserts himself and who has, in the process of watching, seen several things he did not expect to see. "What's your name?" she asked. A pause. The specific length of a decision being made. "Rael," he said. "Rael what?" Another pause. Shorter. "Just Rael." Behind her, Elder Marin made a sound. Quiet, involuntary. The sound of a woman swallowing something significant. "I don't know what the Sealfire Law means," Zara said. "But whatever it means, I'm invoking it." Something behind Rael's eyes shifted. Something she could not name yet. "You understand," he said, quietly enough that only she could hear. "That the law binds in both directions. It isn't only a claim on me. I understand. You're claiming a complete stranger. I'm refusing to be claimed by a man who loves my sister," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at her. Not the look of a man being pulled into something. The look of a man who has just collided with something he did not have on his map and is recalibrating with complete focus. "Yes," he said. "There is a difference." Then Elder Marin was there, pushing through the edge of the crowd with her staff and her obsidian eyes and her expression, and here is the part that Zara would not fully understand until later. The expression on Elder Marin's face when she reached the shadow of the gate and saw the stranger's face fully in the torchlight was not the expression of a 79-year-old woman processing a legal complication. It was the expression of someone who had just stepped on a floor they believed was solid and felt it move. Marin's eyes went wide. For one suspended moment, just one, the elder who had seen 2 territorial wars and 43 mating ceremonies and the complete collapse of 3-pack hierarchies and had not been visibly shaken by a single moment of any of it, looked at the man in the road-worn cloak and went still as deep water. Then she took one small step backward. "You're—" she began. "Don't," he said, quietly. The single word carrying the full and absolute weight of someone accustomed to having their instructions followed without negotiation. Marin closed her mouth, and Zara stood between them and felt the first cold finger of understanding begin to move up the back of her neck. Chapter 3. Marin explained the Sealfire Law in the small room behind the east corridor, with the ceremony noise dying down beyond the closed door. The law was old. It had been written in the centuries when forced matings were common, a mercy law, designed to allow a third party to interrupt a binding and give the bound wolf a genuine choice. Noble in origin, but it had teeth. "If the person kissed invokes the king's seal," Marin said, and her voice had taken on a quality Zara had never heard from her before, a carefulness, like someone walking ice. "The Sealfire claim escalates to a court binding. It cannot be dissolved by either party alone. Both wolves must appear before the full court of the Darkfen territories and petition for dissolution in front of the king's council. The Darkfen court," Zara said. That's 3 days north. We're an Ashbourne pack matter. Marin was quiet for 1 beat too long. Marin. The king's seal, Marin said, can only be invoked by 1 wolf. She folded her hands on her staff. She was doing the thing people do when they are about to deliver information they would prefer not to be delivering. The Alpha King himself. The room became very small. Zara let that settle. Picked it up. Turned it over. Set it back down. I kissed the Alpha King, she said. At the altar fire. In front of the assembled pack. In front of me as a witness. Marin met her eyes. Yes. And now, I'm bound to him. If he invokes the seal, he has until sunrise. Marin paused. He may release the claim. Many would in his position. The political complications alone. He won't release it, Zara said. Marin studied her. What makes you certain? Zara thought about the amber eyes. About the way the look in them had shifted, not softened. Something more specific than that when she said, "Times I'm refusing to be claimed by a man who loves my sister." The way he had looked at her like she was a piece of information he had not accounted for and was not prepared to discard. I just know, she said. She was right. Chapter 4. The night between the ceremony and the sunrise was the longest of Zara's life. She sat in the kitchen of the small western house, her mother's house. Always her mother's house, and she sat with it. The whole weight of the evening. The true sight, and what it had held. The 40-second walk across the courtyard. The warmth of a stranger's mouth and the specific, terrifying freedom of doing the unreasonable thing. Ren came an hour after the crowd dispersed. She appeared in the doorway with her pale hair loose from its ceremony pins, and her gray eyes swollen and her hands clasped in front of her like someone trying to hold their own bones together. Zara let her in without a word. They sat across the kitchen table with cooling tea between them and the fire burning low, and Ren told her everything. She told her about the summer before Colt ever came to Zara, the Ridge Festival, the firelight, the moment of looking at each other that had rearranged the air. She told her about turning away from it deliberately, consciously, with both hands, because Zara had been searching for something, and Ren had decided without being asked that the only acceptable thing was to leave it alone. She told her about watching the courtship begin, about manufacturing happiness for 2 years, about the specific kind of suffering that comes from loving someone and sitting across the table from them while they describe the person they chose instead. She told her about the previous year, when Colt had come to her privately and told her what he felt. And she had told him he was marrying her sister, and he had said he knew, and he had gone back to building the life he had chosen anyway. When Ren finished, she was crying, not noisily. The quiet, thorough kind of crying that comes from holding something for 2 years and finally putting it down in the wrong place. Zara listened to all of it. She sat with it afterward for a long time. Here is the thing about Zara. She was not a woman who let herself be consumed by the wrong emotion. She had anger. It was there. It was real. It was hers. But underneath the anger, she had something else. She had proportion. She had always had it, since childhood. The ability to hold 2 true things at once without needing one of them to be wrong so the other could be entirely right. Ren had made a bad choice out of love. That was still a bad choice. But bad choices made from love are a different species from bad choices made from cruelty, and Zara's sense of proportion was too precise to pretend otherwise. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," Zara said. "It's not fine. I know. You should have come to me 2 years ago. The day you turned him away." Ren's hands shook against the mug. "I know. I would have been hurt. I would have needed time. But I would have known." Zara looked at the fire. "Instead, I spent 2 years building a life inside a story I didn't have the full text of." Ren didn't answer. There was no answer. "I need time," Zara said finally. "Not forever. Time. Whatever you need." Ren wiped her face with the back of her hand. Whatever you need, Zara. Always. Zara stood, went to the window. The eastern sky was beginning its first pale suggestion of gray. Somewhere between here and dawn, a king was deciding whether to bind himself to a woman he had known for less than an hour. She thought about the amber eyes and the single-word times, just Rael times, and the way Elder Marin had stepped backward like the floor had moved. She thought about the Darkfen territories, 3 days north, the oldest wolf kingdom in this half of the world. She thought about staying in Ashbourne, coming back to this courtyard, this hall, this community she had bled for, carrying the knowledge of what the true sight had shown her, watching Colt move through her days, watching Wren watch Colt, building her life inside a story that everyone around her would be trying not to reference. She thought about her wolf. Her wolf had been restless since the altar, pressing and circling, not in distress but in anticipation, the feeling of something moving toward its own resolution. A river finally finding the sea it was made for. She had never understood her wolf. Other wolves spoke of their animal selves with familiarity, a constant companion, a second voice. Zara's wolf had always been private and watchful and selective. It did not speak often. When it did, she had learned to listen. It had been speaking since the moment she kissed the stranger at the gate. She turned from the window. "Get some sleep," she told Wren. She went out into the gray pre-dawn and walked to the cold altar. Rael Dusk was there. He was standing at the base of the altar steps with his cloak still on and his face turned toward the eastern sky, with a posture that suggested he had been there long enough for the posture to stop being intentional, long enough for it to become simply where he was, which is a different thing. He heard her come. He turned. "You didn't leave," she said. "No. You could have. Released the claim. Been gone before dawn." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" A pause. The gray light was growing at the horizon's edge, slow and inevitable, the way mornings come in autumn, not warmly, but with full commitment. "Releasing the claim," he said, "returns you to the original ceremony, returns you to him." Something moved across his face, then brief, controlled, genuine enough to be unplanned. "My wolf refused." She heard the full weight of that sentence. He was not dressing it in strategy or politics or the language of royal obligation. He was telling her plainly that his wolf had made a decision, and that he had argued with it through the long hours of this night, and that he had eventually conceded. That kind of honesty, from a man like this one, costs something. "You didn't choose this," she said. "Neither did you." "No." She met his eyes. "But I choose what happens next. That isn't negotiable." He looked at her for a long, assessing moment. "Is that a condition?" "That's a fact." And something in his expression for just a moment, for just the span of a single breath, moved toward the border of warmth. Not warmth, the outline times of it. The suggestion of it, from a man who had clearly spent significant time ensuring warmth remained at a managed distance. "Then we agree," he said. He reached into his cloak and withdrew a ring. Plain iron. No ornamentation. On it, a single engraved mark that Zara had never seen, but her wolf reacted to it with a jolt of recognition so sharp it moved through her chest like a cold hand had pressed flat against her sternum from the inside. The sun broke the horizon, and the king's seal closed between them like a lock finding its key. Chapter 5. He gave her 3 days to prepare for the journey north. She had expected him to arrive with wolves and a schedule and the brisk efficiency of a man who understood that his time was more valuable than her comfort. Instead, he gave her 3 days, told her he would be at the northern gate at dawn on the 4th morning, and left. That was the first thing that surprised her. It would not be the last. Colt came on the first day. He arrived in the morning with his apology already constructed. She could see the architecture of it in his face before he opened his mouth. The careful arrangement of a man who needs the other person's forgiveness, not just because he is sorry, but because he needs somewhere to put the guilt so it stops living in his chest. She let him speak. All of it. The years of trying, the genuine love he did carry for her, the anguish of failing at the altar. She listened until he finished. "Everything you just said is true," she told him. "And none of it changes what the true sight showed me. Not the truth of your words. The truth of your wolf. Zara, go home, Colt. Talk to Ren." She looked at him steadily. "Not the managed version. All of it. On the table. Find out what's true between you and deal with it honestly for the first time." She stood. "That's what you need to do. Not this." He looked at her for a long time. He left. And later she would find this out from Petra, delivered in the clipped, neutral tone Petra used to convey information while maintaining deniability Rael had spoken to Colt privately that night. She did not know what was said. She knew only that when Colt left the following morning, his face held the expression of a man who had been delivered a very specific message about the exact nature and limits of his welcome in Darkfen territory. She did not ask Rael about it. She thought about it constantly. On the second day, Ren helped her pack. They worked in near silence, folding things into a traveling chest with the practiced efficiency of women who know how to do practical things in the middle of pain. Ren tucked a small wrap of the dried herbs Zara used for headaches into the corner of the chest without comment. Zara did not comment on the tucking. "The Darkfen territories," Ren said eventually. "I've heard things." "What things?" "That it's the oldest kingdom in this half of the world. That the king is fair but not warm. That he's never taken a Luna." She paused, folding a gray wool tunic with more precision than the task required. "Do you think he's a good man?" Zara thought about the altar steps in the pre-dawn gray. "About times my wolf refused times, and the 3 days and the plain iron ring. I think he's a complicated one," she said. "I'll know more when I get there." On the third day, she climbed the ridge above Ashbourne, where you could see the full territory spread below, and the dark tree line of the graywood forest to the north and beyond it, barely visible, the suggestion of the mountains that held the Darkfen court in their stone embrace. She stood there for a long time, her wolf pressed against her ribs, and the feeling that came back was not fear, and was not grief, and was not the specific ache of leaving something she had built. It was bigger than those things. Older. The feeling of something finally moving in the right direction. She stood on the ridge and let it come, and did not try to name it yet. She was not ready to name it yet. Chapter 6. The fourth morning was the color of iron, and nobody was pretending otherwise. Rael was at the northern gate, as promised, with 6 wolves, who carried themselves the way wolves carry themselves when the weapons aren't hidden, not visibly armed, just visibly times ready, which is a different and more honest thing. Beside him, slightly apart in the manner of someone who has learned that the person in charge makes better decisions when they aren't crowded, stood a woman with short dark hair and the precise, unhurried eyes of someone paid to identify problems before they had the chance to introduce themselves. "Petra Vane," Rael said. "My commander." Petra looked at Zara. "Not the way you look at a guest. The way you look at an equation you haven't finished yet." "I heard what happened at the ceremony," she said. "I'm not here to make you feel welcome. I'm here to make sure you arrive alive. Those are different jobs." "I appreciate the precision," Zara said. Something shifted in Petra's face. A single notch of respect, the smallest denomination available. But it was there. They rode north. The graywood forest swallowed them 3 hours out of Ashbourne, a road so old it had forgotten being made, running between trees so enormous their canopy turned midday light green and cathedral thin. Cold earth, deep quiet, centuries of undisturbed growth pressing in from both sides. For the first hour, Rael rode ahead. For the second, Zara pulled alongside him. They rode in silence, the kind that is not empty but full of the specific work 2 people do when they are taking each other's measure and don't want conversation getting in the way of the reading. His silence was steady, present. The silence of a man entirely inside the current moment, not constructing the next one. She was still deciding what to do with that when Petra appeared without warning at Rael's other side and held out a folded piece of paper. He took it, read it, folded it back. His face did not change by a single degree, but something behind it went very flat. The specific flatness of someone receiving information that requires immediate, invisible management. "When?" he said. "Border Scout found it at dawn. A Greywood trail marker left for whoever came through this road." Petra's voice was a blade wrapped in linen. "Somebody knew our route before we did." "How many people knew it?" "6. A pause with glass in it. All of them mine." The trees pressed closer. Zara looked between them. "What was in the paper?" Neither answered immediately. "A name," Rael said. She waited. "Yours?" he said. The forest held that. The green light moved in the canopy above them. Zara turned it over. Someone had known she would be on this road before she was on this road. Not following. Waiting. Which meant the danger was ahead of them, not behind. "How far to the next waypoint?" she said. 4 hours, Petra said. "Then we ride faster." She met Petra's eyes directly. 8 years in pack enforcement. I know what it means when your enemy has your route before you do. They're not tracking us. They're positioned. Faster. A beat. Something moved in Petra's face that had not been there before, not quite trust. The step before trust. The moment when a person stops managing their uncertainty and makes a call. "Double pace," she said over her shoulder. "Move up." They moved. And in the space of one hoofbeat, Rael looked at her just once, just briefly, with something in the amber that had not been there this morning. Not gratitude. Something more specific. The look of a man whose estimate of something has just been revised significantly upward. She didn't acknowledge it. She felt it land anyway. They were riding hard when he said, quietly, beneath the beat of the pace, "The true sight." She looked at him. "At the altar," he said. "You saw Colt's truth. But there was something else. Wasn't there?" It was not a question. She looked at the road ahead, at the paper with her name on it that Petra was carrying somewhere behind them, at the trees that had stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like cover. "A flash," she said. "At the very end of the 30 heartbeats, a room I've never been in. Stone walls. A fire. A pause. Your face." His horse kept its pace. So did his breathing. Only his hands on the reins, just barely, went still. "Not now," she said. "Later. A moment I haven't reached yet." The canopy shifted above them, green to darker green. "What was in my face?" he said. She turned and looked at him directly. "I don't know you well enough yet to name it." She faced forward and did not say the rest of it, which was that her wolf already knew, that the image had not dimmed in 4 days of deliberate dismissal, that she suspected she would recognize the expression when she arrived at it, because some part of her was already moving toward it, whether she had decided to or not. "What were you doing in Ashbourne?" she said instead. "Passing through. Kings don't travel in disguise without a reason." "No," he said. "They don't." She waited. "Not yet," he said, which was not times no, and they both understood the difference. She held it, filed it, kept riding. They were 2 hours from the Greywood's edge when the wolf stepped onto the path. Petra's whistle was out before the shape ahead had fully registered one hard, low note that stopped the party cold, hands going to weapons that were suddenly entirely visible. The wolf on the path was in human form, stood dead center of the road with his arms loose and his posture carefully, deliberately non-threatening, which was its own kind of threat, because you only practice looking harmless when you've had time to think about it. Young, maybe 25. Unknown pack markings on the collar. His eyes moved to Rael, then to Zara. Stayed on Zara. "Message," he said. For the Ashbourne wolf. The forest was absolutely, completely silent. Say it, Zara said. Go home. The matter you've walked into is older than you are, and it will not end the way you think. You are being used. Go home now. A pause, brief and precise as a cut. And no one you love in Ashbourne is touched. Touched. Not threatened. Touched. The clinical vocabulary of someone who has delivered this kind of message before and understood that precision lands harder than volume. Zara felt her wolf slam against her ribs. Once. Hard. Like a fist from the inside. She breathed through it. Who sent you? Someone who knows what you carry. And what happens when the wrong people understand it fully. That's not an answer. It's all you get. He held her gaze. Go home. She looked at him. The young face carrying the old errand. The specific quality of his stillness not comfortable, not convinced. The stillness of a person complying by discipline more than belief. Tell whoever sent you, she said, that I have been told to go home my entire life. By people with considerably more standing than a messenger on a forest road. She met his eyes without moving. It has never once worked. 3 seconds. The wolf stepped off the path. The greywood took him back without a sound, as though he had never existed. Petra was at her side, before the echo of the last footstep. All speed. Now. They rode. They rode for 20 minutes before Petra pulled alongside and held something out without ceremony. The trail marker, a flat piece of wood, cut to a familiar size, a familiar shape. Zara took it. She looked at the symbol burned into its face. Her wolf went absolutely still. She had seen that symbol 10,000 times. She had used that symbol. Every enforcement officer in the Ashbourne pack used it to mark safe passage corridors during territorial patrols. It was an internal mark. A pack internal mark, not recorded in any interpack registry, not visible in any shared wolf code. Not something a wolf from outside Ashbourne's borders would have any reason to know. Someone from her pack had put her name on that marker. Someone from Time's home. You see it, Petra said. Not a question. Yes. Her voice came out level. She did not know how. How many wolves in your pack would know that mark? Zara thought about the answer. Turned it over. Set it down. Too many, she said. Which was not the truth. The truth was times too few to be comfortable. Enforcement officers and senior wolves and people she had worked beside for years. People whose faces she could see right now, with a clarity that felt like a hand around her throat. She gave Petra back the marker. She rode. And in the gallop's rhythm she thought about times, touched times, and about Wren alone in the small western house, and about how the distance between Ashbourne and wherever she was going had just stopped feeling like freedom and started, feeling like the specific, exposed vulnerability of a person who has something to lose, and simultaneously like the thing she'd been most afraid of, that the story she was running toward had its roots in the life she'd just left behind. She rode harder. The silence between them for the rest of the day was the loudest thing in the forest, and Zara filled every inch of it with a list of names she did not want to be making. Chapter 7. The Darkfen court did not arrive the way she expected. She had imagined, without fully realizing she had been imagining, towers reaching, gold catching the light, the deliberate grandeur of power that needs you to feel small when you enter, so it can feel larger by comparison. What she found was permanence. The fortress had not been built onto the mountain. It had grown from it walls continuous with the rock face, black granite that had been standing long enough to stop needing to prove anything. The towers didn't reach. They leaned into the sky with the patience of things that have outlasted the ambitions of everything built around them. The gates were iron-banded oak that had not been new in 2 centuries, and did not pretend otherwise. She had ridden 2 days through a forest where someone had written her name on a trail marker and sent a wolf to threaten everyone she loved. She arrived at a fortress that looked like it had been standing since before the concept of being threatened had been invented. The two things sat beside each other in her chest, like stones of different temperatures. She squared her shoulders and rode through the gates. The court assessed her before she dismounted. That's the only word for it not watching, assessing with the collective, level attention of a community that knows exactly what belongs in its space and is currently deciding where Zara falls on that taxonomy. She could feel the verdict forming before her boots hit the ground. From the steps of the main hall descending with the precise, unhurried pace of a woman who has prepared both her entrance and her expression, came Lady Callista Vorn, noble-born, golden-haired, dressed in Darkfen's deep gray ceremonials with a silver chain at her throat and the composed, lovely face of someone who understood from the age of 15 that a court is a stage, and had spent every year since mastering every mark on it. She was formidable. Zara acknowledged it immediately, without rancor. Formidable is just a quality, like height. It's not a verdict, my king. She inclined her head to Rael with 4 years of practiced grace. We received word. Her eyes moved to Zara, held exactly 1 second too long. And of the circumstances, Callista, Rael's voice, her name, and the full stop that ended it. I've prepared the East Wing guest quarters. The pause before Time's guest times was less than a heartbeat. It landed like a hand placed flat and deliberate on a surface. For your visitor. Zara will have the Luna quarters, Rael said. The courtyard did not move, but Zara counted 3 wolves who stopped pretending to work, 2 who looked immediately at Callista, waiting for the read. Callista's composed smile did not change by a degree. Of course, she said. Then she stepped directly toward Zara. Not around, not at an angle. Directly, time stopping close enough that the silver chain at her throat caught the light, and Zara could see the quality of her composure up close. Not softness, not hardness, but something maintained so long and so rigorously that it had fused into architecture, a face-shaped fortress, beautiful, functional, entirely sealed. I'll show you to your quarters, she said. Warm. Genuinely warm, and that was the sharpest edge in the whole arsenal, because cold dismissal can be dismissed in return, but warmth from a woman who is entirely certain of her position is a weapon that leaves no visible mark. Callista, Rael's voice again. A line, quietly but unmistakably drawn. She turned to him with a smile that stopped at her cheekbones. It's no trouble. She's new here. She doesn't know the way. 3 seconds of silence with an entire argument compressed inside it. I'll find it, Zara said. Both of them looked at her. I always find my way. She walked toward the hall entrance, not toward a guide, not toward permission, directly. With the specific stride of a woman who has entered rooms she was not entirely sure she belonged in for 26 years, and has never once waited to be invited through. She did not know which corridor led to the Luna quarters. She walked as though she did. At the first junction she almost stopped, almost times, and in that half-second of uncertainty she looked up. Callista was watching her from the courtyard below, not with triumph, not with satisfaction. Something Zara had not prepared herself for, and could not categorize immediately, and would spend 3 days afterward turning over. Grief. Real grief. Sitting in Callista Vorn's face for one single, unguarded second before the composure closed back over it like water healing over a stone it has swallowed. She loved him, Zara understood. Not the position. Him, the actual man, underneath the king. That was worse than an enemy who wanted power. That was a person who had wanted something true, and had spent 4 years building a fortress around the wanting, because the wanting had no place to go. And everything, the corner seats, the slow servants, the exquisite, unassailable courtesy, none of it had ever been about territory. All of it had been about loss. Finn appeared at her elbow from a side passage as if he had been stationed at this exact junction. "Left," he said. "Third door." She took it. Behind her, in the courtyard below, Rael and Callista were having the kind of conversation that does not produce sound. She did not look back. She carried the grief she had seen and the weight it gave to everything, and she understood that navigating a woman who is cruel is one kind of problem. Navigating a woman who is in pain is an entirely different one, and considerably harder, because you cannot fight grief with strategy, and you cannot make pain into a villain without becoming something you don't want to be. She reached the third door. She went in. She stood at the window and looked north at the mountain she now lived inside, and her wolf pressed against her ribs with the steady, insistent quality of something that has been waiting for a very long time and is done waiting quietly. Chapter 8. The Luna quarters smelled of 11 years of closed air and pine dust and the specific silence of a room that knows it has been waiting. Zara stood at the window and looked at the graywood tree line in the far distance, and did not allow herself more than 60 seconds of it. Then she unpacked with the efficiency of a woman who understands that composure is a finite resource, and squandering it on feelings with no audience is poor management, and went to find the king. His study door was ajar. Not open, not shut the angle of someone who expects a visitor, and is leaving the choice entirely to them. Books, maps, the layered, organized complexity of a mind that thinks in multiple directions simultaneously and needs the physical evidence spread around it to function. Rael stood at the table with his sleeves rolled and his full attention on a map with the quality of a man who has temporarily left the building. He looked up. "Sit," he said. She sat. "Walk me through the court binding. All of it." He walked her through it, petition, counsel, timeline. Direct and unpadded, no reassurance added to the difficult parts, which she was beginning to understand was simply how he communicated when he was not performing the king. "How long?" she asked. "Weeks. Possibly longer, depending on—" "Callista Vorn," she said. "A beat. She has alliances through most of my senior council. She will not facilitate. She expected to be Luna. She expected to be times considered." The jaw shifted slightly. "I never offered her anything. I need to be clear. Courts build their own narratives, and hers placed her in a role I never confirmed." He paused. "I should have corrected it years ago." Zara looked at him. That last sentence had not been in the briefing. That was not a king managing information. That was a man acknowledging a mistake without defending it, without qualifying it, just setting it down in plain sight. It landed with the weight of something costly. She filed it. "What do you times want?" she said. He looked at her. Something behind those amber eyes went very still, the stillness of a question that has arrived before its answer is finished. "I'm working it out. Work faster. I need to know what I'm navigating." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. The blueprint of one. "You speak to me as if I'm not the king. You speak to me as if I chose to be here. We can both adjust." He looked at her for one long, level moment. Then he sat down, put his hands flat on the map, and talked. The real version, not the performance of authority, not the managed briefing of a man who controls what lands. The direct, stripped-back communication of someone who has decided honesty is more operationally useful than image maintenance. Council loyalties. What Callista would do and in what sequence. Where the pressure would land first, and what it would feel like when it did. Not the political version. The personal one, what it did to a person. Where it found the cracks. How it widened them. He told her all of it the way he would brief an ally. When she asked the right questions, specific, operational, free of self-pity, she watched something in his posture make a small, invisible adjustment. The adjustment of a man who has conducted 1,000 briefings and is encountering, without warning, someone receiving one at a level he did not expect. "You've done this before," she said. Not for someone else. For yourself. You know the anatomy of this pressure because it was used on you. When I first took this seat, he looked at the map, not her. I know exactly what it feels like, and exactly where it hits hardest, and exactly how long it takes to recover from. A pause. No one told me. I learned it from the bruises. The fire crackled. That kind of honesty, specific, unarmored, from someone with every reason to project only strength lands differently than expected. It doesn't soften a person. It makes them more real. And real is more dangerous than formidable. Because you can strategize around formidable, but real gets under your defenses before you've had time to raise them. She was still sitting with that when the study door opened. Not knocked. Opened. Callista walked in with the smooth, unhurried confidence of a woman entering a room she has entered 1,000 times without incident, and has not yet been told that has changed. She stopped when she saw Zara. One fraction of a second of surprise. Immediately managed composure, snapping back into position so fast it would have been invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. But Zara had spent 8 years in enforcement learning to watch for exactly that. Callista had not expected her here. She had come to the study because the study was where Rael was in the evenings, and the study was where Callista came in the evenings. And that pattern had held long enough that it had stopped feeling like a pattern and had started feeling like simply times how evenings went. "I'm sorry," Callista said, composure fully restored. Warm again, seamless again. "I didn't realize you had company." She looked at Rael. He looked back. "Good night, Callista," he said. 3 words. Absolute and complete. The way a door swings shut, not slammed, not gentle, just closed with the full authority of something that was made to close. Callista's eyes moved to Zara, and what was in them for that half-second before the door shut was not anger, not calculation. It was recognition. The recognition of a woman who has just looked at something clearly for the first time and does not like what clearly looks like. The door shut. The study went quiet in the specific way of a room where something significant has just happened between 2 people who are not yet ready to name it to each other. Zara looked at the map. He looked at the fire. Then, without looking up, "She's not a villain." "I know," Zara said. He stopped. Chose. "She's someone who was given reason to believe something that I was 2 times absent times to correct. For years. Because the correction required a conversation I didn't have sufficient reason to have." He looked up. "Until now." He said it simply. Like a fact. Not performing the admission. Not inviting a response. Simply placing it between them on the table like something he was done carrying alone. Zara looked at him. At the man who had given her 3 days without being asked. Who had spoken to Colt in the night and never mentioned it. Who had told her about the bruises from the seat he'd had to learn to sit in with no one to show him how. She was running out of reasons not to trust the edges of him. She was not sure what to do with that yet. "Good night," she said. She went. Behind her the study was quiet, and the fire burned, and Rael sat with his hands flat on the map of a kingdom he had been running alone for a very long time. Chapter 9. The court tested her inside 3 days. It was not dramatic, and that was precisely the point. A campaign of small erosions is more effective than a frontal assault, because the target cannot rally against what they cannot clearly name. The corner seat, not the Luna's, not the guest of honors, the corner seat, the one that said, "Times we haven't decided what you are times," without once saying anything. The servants fractionally slower, slow enough to register, too slow to legitimately complain about. The council members with their exquisitely polished courtesy, buffed so smooth it had gone past warmth and out the other side into something that looked like respect and functioned as its opposite. And Callista never once cruel, never once in a way that could be named and confronted, moving through the court with the gravitational pull of someone who has been its center long enough to make her presence feel like weather rather than strategy. Zara watched. Said nothing. Did nothing. For 3 days. Because she was in new territory and she was mapping it before she moved through it, and that was the only tactically sound response, even when it cost her something she would not name out loud. It cost her something she would not name out loud. On the morning of the 4th day, she was crossing the east courtyard when 4 senior wolves near the well said something they intended her to overhear. The southern girl has spirit. Spirit doesn't know how to run a court. She'll see soon enough that the king doesn't actually. She stopped. Not with drama. Not with the performance of being wounded. She turned, found their faces with the full, level, unhurried look of a woman who has been read the wrong place message her entire life and has developed an extremely specific answer to it. The 4 wolves went quiet. "I can hear you," she said. "I assume that was the intention, so I'll save you the hour of wondering what it landed." She looked at each of them, in turn, without rushing. "Nothing. But I appreciate you being specific about where you stand. That's useful data." She walked on, hands steady, chin level, everything exactly as it should look. Her wolf was not steady. Her wolf was pressing against the inside of her chest with a grief that had nothing to do with the 4 wolves near the well. It was the accumulated weight of 26 years of wrong place, of building herself into something undeniable in Ashbourne, and then kissing a stranger at an altar, and arriving somewhere new and discovering that the wrong place feeling had followed her across 3 days of mountain road and 200-year-old gates, as though it had been stitched into her. She stopped in the corridor, put one hand flat on the stone wall, and her wolf time surged. Not the restless pressing of the past days. Not the anticipatory circling. This was something she had never felt before, her wolf hitting the inside of her chest like a wave hitting rock. Full force, white and complete, and in its wake the specific, terrifying warmth that comes before a shift. Her fingers against the wall going briefly, undeniably times different. The bones underneath asking a question she had not been asked since she was 16 years old, and had answered times not here, not now times, and the wolf had listened. "Now," her wolf said. Not a request, a statement of intention. "Not here." Her voice, internal, hard. "Not in this corridor. Not where they are waiting for a reason." The warmth pulled back. Slowly, with the reluctance of something conceding a battle, while the war remains entirely open, she stood with her forehead against the cold stone and breathed. Her wolf had never pushed like that. Not once. In 26 years of enforcement, assessments, and territorial standoffs, and the worst nights her life had held, her wolf had been present and measured, held, controlled. A partner that understood the parameters. Whatever had been happening to her wolf since the altar was not measured. It was not controlled. It was something building toward an expression she did not yet have language for, and the building was accelerating, and she did not know what she was going to do when it arrived. She pressed both palms flat against the stone, until the cold replaced the warmth entirely. "Unknown is not wrong," she told herself. "You have operated in unknown before." She pushed off the wall. She kept walking, hands steady. Everything else taking longer. Finn found her at the North Corridor junction 11 minutes later, appearing from a side passage with a cup of tea, and the specific timing of someone who has been watching and waiting for the right moment not to comfort, to inform. "You're watching," he said. "Yes." "Good." He fell into step. "Most people in your position attack or disappear inside the first week. You're doing neither. I'm doing both on the inside," she said. "On the outside, I'm mapping the landscape." He almost smiled. It was close enough to count. "The Luna quarters haven't been used in 11 years, he said, delivering it with the flat precision of data transfer. "Not since his mother died. He has never put a guest in them. Lady Callista has requested them twice in 4 years, declined both times." He stopped. "She's taken her move to the council. Old dissolution clause council recommendation. Without both parties' consent. If the binding is judged contrary to crown stability, she needs 6 votes. Zara went still. Does she have them? 4 certain. 2 leaning. 3 uncommitted. He held her eyes. You have 3 days. What do I do with 3 days? Talk to the 3 uncommitted. Not with law, that's her ground. Not with argument, she's been building arguments for 4 years. Talk to them as wolves. He paused. They're not bad wolves. They've been told a specific story about this court's future, and you are a disruption to that story. You don't need to replace the story. You just need to put something true beside it. You're the king's aide, she said. Why are you doing this? Finn was quiet for a moment, with the quality of someone choosing between the safe answer and the true one. Because I've served Rael Dusk for 3 years, he said. In 3 years I've watched him be alone in every way a person can be alone while being surrounded by a full court. He looked at her directly. 4 days since you arrived. I've watched him sit across a table from someone and actually talk. Not perform, not manage, just talk. He turned. 3 days. Don't waste them. He left. Zara stood in the corridor with the cold tea in her hands, and her wolf still pressing, not a surge now, something steadier, deeper, the feeling of standing at the edge of something enormous and understanding for the first time that the enormity is not a warning. It is an invitation. She drank the tea. She was halfway to the east wing when a voice stopped her. A word. Low. Careful. The voice of someone making a decision they have not yet finished making. The woman who stepped out of the alcove was not a name she had learned yet, mid-50s. Silver at her temples. The weathered eyes of a wolf who had survived 3 administrations by being very precise about what she chose to see. Council robes. She carried herself with the specific gravity of someone who has decided that what she is about to say is worth what it will cost her. Council member. Yaleth. A pause, brief as a blade. You don't know me. You should. Another pause. I'm one of the 3 you're about to approach. Zara went still. I've already made my decision, Yaleth said. I'm voting against the dissolution. She held Zara's eyes steadily, as a wolf does when it is being entirely transparent. I'm telling you this, because what comes next is not your fault, and you deserve 30 seconds to prepare. What comes next? Yaleth looked down the empty corridor in both directions. The 5th vote is secured. Callista will have her 6 before the session. A pause, and then, flat. The 5th vote is Finn. The cold tea went cold in a different way. Finn, Zara said. The king's aide. Has served Rael Dusk loyally for 3 years. Yes. And has also, for the past 2 months, been passing council intelligence to Lady Callista. Not against Rael. He is loyal to Rael. He believes the dissolution protects Rael from a politically destabilizing situation he walked into by accident. Yaleth met her eyes. He believes he is doing Rael a kindness. He is wrong, but he believes it. The corridor held that. Zara thought about 30 minutes ago. 4 days since you arrived. I've watched him sit across a table from someone and actually talk. Don't waste them. Every word of it could have been true. None of it needed to be strategy. People contain both the genuine feeling and the act that contradicts it, and she had been in enforcement long enough to know that this was not a contradiction that required villainy. Just a man who had made a decision and hadn't finished examining what the decision was made of. It didn't make it smaller. Why are you telling me? She said. Yaleth looked at her for a long moment. Something in her face that was not pity more considered than that. The expression of a wolf who has watched courts fail for 30 years and has developed opinions about what fails them. Because I've been in this court a long time, she said. I've watched wolves with every qualification spend years trying to earn the right to be here. She glanced toward the direction of the king's study. And I've watched a court make a woman feel like a guest in the only building she was allowed to be in. She straightened. You have something I haven't seen in this court in a decade. I don't intend to watch it be dissolved by committee." She stepped back into the alcove. "You have one fewer ally than you thought. You also now have me. Spend your 3 days accordingly." She was gone. Zara stood in the corridor. Finn had been her map. He had been the only person in this fortress who had offered something that felt like genuine orientation, and she had taken it. Because she was in unknown territory, and taking orientation is tactically sound, and she had learned nothing in 3 weeks to contradict him. That was the thing about this kind of intelligence. It didn't require the source to lie. Every word he had said might have been true, and also in service of a conclusion she had not been given. She set the cold tea down on the windowsill. She did not go to find the 3 uncommitted wolves. She went to find Finn. She found him at the end of the north corridor, sorting documents at the small table he used as a secondary desk, with the precise, unhurried attention of a man performing a task that didn't require thought, and therefore had room for other thinking. He looked up, looked at her face. In the fraction of a second before his composure closed back over it, she saw him understand that she knew. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "Tell me the part you left out." He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he folded them on the table, in the specific gesture of someone setting something down they have been carrying while pretending it doesn't weigh anything. "I thought," he said, "that the cleanest outcome for Rael was a dissolution that allowed him to reposition before the full council's attention turned hostile. Callista's strategy was already in motion. I calculated that participating in it controlled participation. With the vote she needed was better than forcing Rael into a public fight he might lose." He looked up. "I was trying to protect him from a situation I believed he had walked into by accident. By voting to dissolve a binding he chose." Finn was quiet. "He chose it," she said. "At the altar. 3 days later at dawn. He chose it at every point between those moments and my arrival here. You decided those choices were errors to be corrected." She looked at him steadily. "How long have you been making corrections on his behalf without telling him?" The question landed. She watched it land, watched the thing in his face that had not been there a moment ago, arrive, and settle with the weight of something a person cannot unsee once they have seen it. He did not answer, which was the most honest thing he had said to her yet. "I need to know," she said, "if there is anything else you've done in the last 3 weeks, in the interest of a clean outcome, that I should know about before tomorrow's session." A long pause. "No," he said. "Then, I'm sorry." She stood. "Tell me one true thing," she said. "The Luna quarters. The real reason he put me there." Finn looked at the table, then at her. "Because it was the only room in this fortress that felt like a statement he meant," he said quietly. "Everything else, the throne, the title, the court he occupies because it is necessary, and he is competent. The Luna quarters have been locked for 11 years, because he couldn't make himself open them for anything less than something real." He held her eyes. "He opened them on the day you arrived, before you said a word inside these gates." Zara filed that. She left. She went to find the 3 uncommitted wolves. She was done waiting to be seen, and she was done navigating with a map someone else had drawn. Chapter 10. She talked to the 3 uncommitted council members. Not with politics. Finn was right about that. Callista owned that ground. Zara met them in corridors and at the communal fire and over the dawn meal. She asked about their territories, their history, the particular difficulties of their positions. She listened with the full, unhurried attention of someone who finds other people genuinely interesting, which she did. It was the quality that had made her effective in Ashbourne's enforcement division for 8 years. That ability to make a person feel seen without asking anything in return. She made no case for herself as Luna. She stated no legal arguments. She simply existed in front of them as a complete person with a full interior life rather than a political position that needed defending. On the second day, Colt arrived. She heard about it from a guard before she saw him, which gave her 30 seconds to breathe through the initial impact of it before she went to the courtyard. He had ridden for 2 days. He was travel-worn and jaw-set with the particular determination of a man who has spent 48 hours in a saddle talking himself into believing his own righteousness. She found him in the courtyard, looked at him. He looked back, and she saw clearly, with the unflinching vision of someone who has recently had their eyes forced fully open, a man she had genuinely loved for 2 years, who had genuinely tried and who was still, even now, here in this courtyard in this mountain fortress, making this about the wrong thing. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "I needed to see that you were safe." She nodded. "I am. You can go. Come home, Zara." He said it the way people say things when they have decided sincerity will do what strategy could not. This place isn't yours. He's a stranger. Whatever law has bound you to him, there has to be a way to— Colt. Her voice was quiet. "Stop." He stopped. "I know what you're doing," she said. "And I understand why. Because if I come home, the guilt has a resolution. The story has a tidier ending for you." She met his eyes. "But I know what I saw in the true sight. And I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I can unknow it. And I'm not going to make decisions that make your guilt smaller at the cost of my own." She paused, choosing the word carefully. Clarity. Lone. He looked at her. Something crossed his face that was not guilt, not sorrow, something quieter than those things. Recognition, maybe. The recognition of a man seeing another person clearly for the first time in a while. "Go home," she said again, not unkindly. "Talk to Ren. All of it. Honestly. For once." He left the following morning. And that evening Petra told her, in the specific clipped tone she reserved for information she believed Zara needed, but had opinions about Rael, had spoken to Colt privately before he rode out. She went to find Rael. She found him in the training yard in the dark, which was not where she had expected to find the Alpha King at 9 in the evening, but which made complete sense once she saw his face. He was alone, sleeves rolled, working through training forms with the focused, mechanical precision of someone using physical work to process something they haven't finished deciding how to feel about. He heard her and stopped. "You spoke to him," she said. "Yes." "What did you say?" He looked at his hands. Something moved through his face, not guilt, not defensiveness. The specific expression of a man who has done something he cannot entirely justify and is not going to try. "I told him," Rael said, "that if he returned to this court for any reason other than a pack emergency, I would personally ensure his future in Ashbourne politics became considerably more complicated than his present." Zara stared at him. "That was not your decision to make." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. He had every right to—" "I know." He met her eyes, steady, not apologizing, not building a case. "He came to take you back. I didn't want him to take you back." A pause, clean and honest. "I'm telling you because you would have found out. I'd rather it come from me." She stood in the cold training yard with the mountain dark above them and the fury real in her chest because he had interfered, because he had done it without asking, and underneath the fury something she was not ready to name. The something was about the words, "Times I didn't want him to take you back," said plainly, without performance. In the dark of a training yard that smelled of cold stone and effort, where no one was watching and there was nothing to gain from the honesty except the giving of it. She walked away, made it to the corridor before she stopped, put her back against the stone, breathed. He had not apologized. He had not justified. He had told her the truth and stood inside the consequence of it, which was either the behavior of a man who respected her enough to give her the real version, or the behavior of a man who had calculated that honesty was the most effective move. and she did not yet know which of those it was. She was beginning to understand that Time's not knowing yet, Time's was going to be the persistent condition of being near this man. She pushed off the wall and went to bed. Chapter 11. On the night before the council session, there was an attempt on the king's life. She did not know until it was over. She had been in her quarters with the Covenant law documents Finn had sourced for her, reading the old language slowly, translating the archaic phrasing into something she could work with when the sound reached her. Not a clash, not a shout. A single brief disturbance at the far end of the corridor, a presence and then an absence, and then a silence that had a different texture than the silence before it. She was out of the room in seconds. Petra was already in the corridor, sword drawn, 2 guards behind her, with the flat-eyed efficiency of people operating on training rather than reaction. "Stay here," Petra said. "What happened?" "Stay here." She stayed for 90 seconds. She was not built for 90 seconds. She followed. She found Rael in the south corridor, standing over an unconscious wolf with his sleeves pushed up, and a cut on the back of his left forearm that was already clotting, and his face wearing the particular expression that comes after physical confrontation, when the adrenaline has already been processed and the body is simply completing its own accounting. He was looking at the wolf on the floor with the flat, thorough attention of a man reviewing a situation, not reacting to it. He looked up when she came around the corner. "I told her to stay," Petra said behind her. "I heard you," Zara said. She looked at his arm. "That's a blade cut." "It's minor. It's a blade cut on the king." She looked at the unconscious wolf on the floor. Young. Pack markings on the collar she didn't recognize. "Who sent him?" Rael studied her for a moment. Then he made a decision she could see it happen. The small shift of someone moving from one mode to another. "That is the question," he said. "Is it Callista?" "It isn't Callista." He looked back at the unconscious wolf. "Callista is many things. She is not someone who employs knives in corridors, and she knows it would end her the moment it was discovered." He was quiet for a moment. "This is something older than Callista." The corridor was cold. The torches threw moving shadows against the walls, and Zara stood in the amber light and felt the frame of her understanding of this situation shift, not a detail changing. The entire frame. Like standing at a window and realizing for the first time that what you thought was a reflection is actually a view. "Rael," she said his name with the weight she had been saving for this. "What were you actually doing in Ashbourne?" He looked at her. The amber eyes. Steady. "Carrying something she had been certain was there for days, and had been waiting for the right moment to name. Come to the study," he said. Chapter 12. He told her about the conspiracy for 2 hours. He told it the way he told everything, directly, economically, with the honesty of a man who has decided that the cost of the truth is lower than the cost of the management of it. He sat across from her at the map table with his sleeves still rolled and the healing cut on his forearm visible, and he laid it out. A network patient, organized, intelligent. Wolves who believed the Darkfen court had grown too centralized, too far from the Covenant's original architecture of distributed authority across the territories. Not entirely wrong in their diagnosis, he said, and this was the part that told her everything about the quality of the man across from her, that he could hold the validity of his enemy's grievance while still naming the violence of their solution. They weren't wrong that the court had drifted. They were catastrophically wrong about burning it down as the correction. 3 years of activity. 18 months of him tracking them. "They're searching for something," he said. He put his finger on the map at a point she didn't recognize. A specific wolf. A specific capability. One that would give them what they need to... A pause. The careful selection of the right word. Expose certain decisions I've made in ways that, without context, would look like things they weren't. What capability? He looked at her, and she understood in the moment before he said it. In the space between his breath and his words, that this was the answer to every pause and every careful management and every question he had asked about the true sight and about her wolf. "Silver sight," he said. The room went very quiet in the way that a room goes quiet when the thing that has been true the entire time finally says itself out loud. "A wolf who carries silver sight," he said, "cannot be deceived in the true sight. They see not just what is present, but what has been and what is coming." Any wolf with that ability who stood at the altar with one of my council members would see every truth that council member carries, including the things I have needed them to carry quietly, including decisions made in the first year of my reign that were necessary and that would appear, presented without context, as, he stopped, as things they weren't. "And the conspiracy wants to find this wolf," Zara said carefully, "and use them to expose your council, to destabilize the court, to create the conditions for what comes after." His jaw shifted. "I came to Ashbourne because one of my trackers had picked up a trail. A wolf in the Ashbourne Valley showing signs of silver sight capability. A wolf who had not yet understood what they were carrying." He held her gaze. "I came to find them, before the conspiracy did." The fire in the study grate crackled. Zara looked at the map, at the point his finger had rested on, at the marking that sat directly over the Ashbourne Valley. She set the pieces down in order. She picked them back up. She set them down again. "You came to Ashbourne to find the wolf with silver sight," she said. "Yes. And you ended up kissed by one instead." He was very still. "What a coincidence," she said. Her voice was level. Every year of enforcement training, every hour of keeping her face still in rooms where her face needed to be still, in service of those 4 words. "Zara, I heard everything you said." She stood. Her chair made a sound on the stone floor. "I need to think." She went. Chapter 13. She did not sleep. She sat at the window of the Luna quarters, with her knees drawn up, and the mountain dark and enormous outside the glass, and she let the information sit in her, the way that difficult things need to sit before you can handle them properly. Not pushed, not rushed, just present. He had come to Ashbourne looking for the wolf with silver sight. She had kissed him. He had invoked the king's seal. She turned it over. Put it down. Turned it over again. And here in the cold of the mountain night, with no one watching, and no performance required, and nowhere for dishonesty to hide, she was ruthlessly, completely honest with herself. What she had seen in the true sight was still in her. The flash rapid, complete of his face in a moment that had not happened yet. The expression on it, she had carried that image for weeks, and she had, in the intervening time, spent enough hours watching this man's face learn to be unguarded in increments, that she now understood the expression she had seen. She could name it. She had begun to feel the edge of it herself. Not trust. Not in full. Not yet. But the beginning of trust, the part that exists before the decision has been made, when your instincts have simply stopped categorizing a person as a variable and have begun treating them as a constant. When the question changes from times "can I trust this" times to times "what does trusting this actually mean?" That shift had happened without her full permission, and she was honest enough with herself to know it. At some point past the 2nd hour of the night, she heard a step in the corridor. Then stillness outside her door. Not Petra, not Finn. She knew Rael's quality of stillness, the way you learn to know the sound a specific room makes when it settles at night by accumulated exposure, by the gradual building of a map you didn't realize you were drawing. He did not knock. She went to the door and opened it. He was there, hands loose at his sides. The expression of a man who has prepared what he intends to say and has arrived uncertain it will be sufficient. "I need you to know something," he said. "All right." "I came to Ashbourne looking for the wolf with silver sight because I needed to protect them, not use them. The conspiracy finding them first." He stopped. What I need you to know is that when you kissed me, I didn't know. I had not identified you. I had not connected you to what I had come looking for." He held her gaze with the directness that she had come to understand was his truest, default state. Underneath everything, my wolf's refusal to release the claim was not strategy. It was not calculation. It was not me seeing an opportunity and taking it. His jaw worked. "I need you to know that. Whatever you decide about any of this, I need that to be in your hands cleanly." The corridor was cold and lit with a single torch, and the mountain pressed its weight against all four walls. "If you wanted to use the silver sight," she said slowly, "releasing the claim would be the wrong move. You'd want me here. You'd want me bound." "Yes," he said. "So keeping me here doesn't prove anything." "No," he said. "It doesn't." She looked at him. At the man who had been called a king since he was old enough to understand the word, and had learned the shape of this court from the bruises it left, and had traveled 3 days south in road-worn clothes to protect something before. Someone else could destroy it. At the man who had given her 3 days without being asked. At the man who had spoken to Colt in the night and had never mentioned it. At the man who had told her, in this very corridor, in the gray pre-dawn of the altar steps, that his wolf had refused and had said it plainly, without armor, without the kind of careful language that powerful men use to avoid the appearance of being moved by something beyond their management. She reached out and touched the healed cut on his forearm. He went very still. She felt his breath change. One slow, controlled adjustment that he made almost too quickly to catch. "Almost. Get some sleep," she said. "The council session is in the morning." She went back inside. She stood at the window with her hand still carrying the warmth of his skin, and the bond running deep and steady between them like something that knew its own course. And she looked at the mountain dark and thought about the flash of vision from the true sight and the expression on his future face that she now had a name for. She thought, "I will find out if I'm right, and if I'm wrong, I will find that out too." Her wolf was still, the deep, certain stillness of something that has finally arrived. Chapter 14. The council session. She walked in at Rael's side in the gray morning light, and she sat across from 9 wolves with 9 different versions of the same question written in their faces. And she did not perform, and she did not shrink, and she did not arrange herself into anything. She was simply Zara, entirely, completely, without apology. Callista presented her case precisely. The dissolution clause, the stability argument, the precedent. She was formidable. Zara watched her and acknowledged it without rancor. Formidable was simply a quality, like height. It was not a verdict. Then Zara spoke. Not about law. Not about the seal fire claim, or the king's seal, or the procedural scaffolding of the petition. About the silver sight. She laid it on the table the way you lay down something heavy that you are done carrying alone. She told them what she had seen in the true sight, at her own altar, not just Colt's truth, but the flash beyond it. She told them about the conspiracy and what it was hunting. She told them that the wolf the conspiracy had been tracking was sitting in this chamber, right now, and had come to Darkfen not as a piece to be moved, but as a person who had walked into a law with her eyes open and had chosen to stay long enough to understand what staying meant. "I'm not asking to be Luna," she said. Her eyes moved through every face at that table. "I'm telling you that I'm here, and that the thing I carry is relevant to the security of this court in ways that have nothing to do with who I am to your king, and that if you spend the political capital required to force a dissolution, you are choosing to send away the one capability in this room that the people trying to destroy this court cannot buy and cannot manufacture." She looked at Callista. Directly, without hostility, with the clean, unadorned clarity of a woman who has decided she will not perform smallness to make other people comfortable. "I'd rather we spend that energy on the actual threat. But that's your choice." The 9 wolves looked at each other. One of the three uncommitted, the one she had talked to longest about his territory in the northern pass, the one who had a daughter Zara's age and had mentioned it twice, leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he said, "I vote to confirm the binding." Two more followed. Callista looked at Zara for a long time. A look that was complicated, not hateful. The complicated look of a woman who has been running toward a thing for 4 years and has arrived at the realization, today, in this room, that the thing was never going to be hers and is choosing, in this moment, to be something other than the person that revelation wants to make her. "The motion for dissolution," Callista said, "is withdrawn." 6 of the 9 voted to confirm. Zara walked out of the chamber into the cold corridor with the gray mountain light coming through the high window and the bond in her chest running warm and steady and certain. Rael walked beside her. He did not say anything. Neither did she. Finn appeared from nowhere with tea, because Finn always appeared from nowhere with tea, and she took it with both hands and let the warmth move through her palms. Petra gave her a single nod from across the corridor. One nod. No elaboration. From Petra, it was a standing ovation. Zara stood at the window and looked out at the mountain. She thought, for the first time, cleanly, without qualification, "I could belong here." She let the thought exist, did not push it, did not rush it, gave it the same room she gave everything that mattered space to become what it actually was. That evening she went to the study. The door was open. Not ajar open. As if the evening had always included this. As if this was simply where she was supposed to be next. She sat across from him. The fire was good. The room smelled of old maps and pine, and the cold mineral quality of the mountain. He had cleared the table of the day's work, and the space between them was simply space, not a barrier, not a stage, just the natural distance between two people who have spent 3 weeks learning the specific geography of each other and are beginning to find it navigable. She felt the rightness of the moment. And then she saw the folio. It was at the far edge of the writing desk, pushed slightly aside with the specific angle of something moved in haste. Not hidden, he had not hidden it, but not in its usual position either. She had spent enough time in this room to know what was usual. She could see the visible edge of the top page. 2 words. In the old wolf script. Underline. Her wolf reacted to those words with a shock of recognition so sharp it was almost physical. A cold hand pressing flat against the inside of her sternum. She had never heard those words. She did not know why her wolf knew them. She did not reach for the folio. Not tonight. She looked at Rael across the fire. He was watching her with the amber eyes that had been telling her, in careful increments, more of the truth than she had expected from someone with this much reason to manage what he revealed. The face she had seen in the true sight vision. The face she was learning. She felt the bond. She felt her wolf. And underneath all of it, quiet and cold and certain as mountain water, she felt the shape of a question that had no answer yet. Underline. Her wolf knew those words. She didn't. Not yet. Later that night, well after the fire had burned to coals, and Rael had retired, and the Darkfen court had gone quiet, Zara went back to the study. The door was unlocked. It had always been unlocked for her. She had not thought about what that meant until she was standing here in the dark, turning the handle. She opened the folio. The document inside was old. Old enough that the edges had gone brown and soft, and the ink had faded to a gray-brown that had once been black. Written in the old wolf script, the kind used only for sacred records and binding covenants. At the top, a crest she had never seen with her eyes, but that her wolf responded to the way you respond to a sound you heard in childhood and forgot with the full body recognition of something that lives below memory. And beneath the crest, a name. Her mother's name. Her mother, who had died when Zara was 12. Who had left her and Ren the small western house, and the lesson she had repeated until it replaced furniture. Nobody gives you anything. You build it or you go without. who had never once spoken of where she came from before Ashbourne, who had kept no photographs, no letters, no evidence of a life before the territory she had settled in and worked in until she died. Zara read. The document was a bloodline record. The Andar line, generations of it, charted and annotated. A family whose wolves had carried something specific in their blood. A gift, the document called it. The old word for it. Silversight. Her grandmother. Her grandmother's mother. Generation by generation, the gift present and noted and tracked. And her mother's name. Present. Confirmed. Which meant, Zara turned the page. More notes. Cross-references to other documents. A tracking of the silver sight manifestation across Andar descendants. Observations about activation conditions. About what could trigger the gift in a generation that carried it dormant. The notes were dense and precise, and written in a hand she had been looking at for 3 weeks. Rael's handwriting. He had known. Before Ashbourne. Before the ceremony. Before she had ever taken his face in her hands and kissed him in front of her entire pack. He had tracked the Andar bloodline to the Ashbourne Valley. He had known exactly which wolf he was looking for. He had known her name. Zara set the document down. She stood in the dark study, with the cold mountain air pressing through the stone walls, and the bond humming steady in her chest, and the fire dead in the grate, and her mother's name in a document written before her mother was born, annotated in the handwriting of the man sleeping 1 floor above her. She asked herself the question, the one that rewrote everything before it. If he had known who she was before the altar, if he had tracked her, found her, arrived in her village with her name already in his notes, then what was she in this story? The woman he had chosen? Or the wolf he had come to collect? The king's seal, the ancient law that had bound them to each other, had that been his wolf refusing to let her go? Or had it been the most elegant, patient, perfectly constructed trap she had ever walked into? She closed the folio. She left the study. She walked past the Luna quarters, and past the corridor where he had stood in the night, and told her what he needed her to know, and up the stairs to the highest tower of the Darkfen fortress, where the mountain air came off the peaks with the force of something that had been building speed for 100 miles, and landed on your face like a statement. She stood at the top of the world. Her world, maybe, or her cage, dressed in belonging, her wolf pressed against her ribs. Not afraid, not retreating, waiting the specific charged waiting of something standing at the very edge of its own answer, about to find out whether the ground on the other side of this moment is solid. She was the wolf with silver sight. She had been her whole life, and had not known it. Her mother had known. Her mother had run. And Rael Dusk had followed the trail of her bloodline south, and arrived in her village, and stood in the shadow of a courtyard gate on the night of her mating ceremony, and she would not know, until she looked him in the eyes, and asked him with everything she had, whether he had been waiting there to save her or to claim her. She was not leaving until she knew. She was not leaving until she had stood in front of the king with his own document in her hands and watched what happened to his face. She was not leaving until she had stood at the altar of whatever truth this was and looked into it with the full force of what she carried and seen exactly what looked back. The mountain held her up. The stars above the Darkfen peaks burned cold and permanent and indifferent. And Zara, who had kissed a stranger to survive the night and had arrived, against every reasonable expectation, at the edge of something enormous, tipped her face up to the dark and let her wolf come to the surface. Let it press against the boundary of her skin. Let it speak in the language that exists below language. "I see you," it said. "Not to the mountain. Not to the night. I see you. And I am coming. Friends. Friends." She walked away from a broken altar with nothing except her own fury and her own choices. She survived a council that wanted her gone. She found her footing in a court that was built to make her feel like she didn't have any. And then she found her mother's name in a document she was never supposed to see, in the handwriting of the man she had begun carefully, against her own best instincts to trust. And now she is standing at the top of a mountain, in the dark, with the biggest question of her life pressing against every surface of her. Did Rael Dusk trap her? Did he save her? Or is the answer something she is not yet prepared for, something the silver sight will show her when she finally learns to use it fully? What does she see when she looks into him with everything she has? And what times does she see about herself? I need to hear from you right now. Drop a comment below. 2 questions. First, the moment Zara kissed the stranger at the altar, could you have done that? Could you have chosen public ruin over private betrayal deliberately, with your eyes open in front of everyone you have ever known? Second, Rael, his handwriting in the margins of her mother's name. Is he the trap or the answer? And when Zara confronts him with that document, what do you think he says? Tell me. I read every single comment, every single one. Your voice in this story matters to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and ring that bell, because part 2 is coming. And what happens when Zara comes down from that tower and walks to his door with the folio in her hands? What his face does, what his wolf does, what the silver sight shows her, in the moment she stops protecting herself from the truth, is going to break something open. In the best possible way. I'll see you in the next chapter.